Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This time, it's all about you and your fascination with CBD and neuroplasticity.
Absolutely.
You really want to get down to the molecular level, right? To see how CBD can actually reshape the brain.
We'll go step by step. We'll make it crystal clear, even the really complex stuff.
And how it differs from other cannabinoids, right? Especially when we talk about those intricate signaling pathways.
It's a journey, that's for sure, into a microscopic world, but it has big implications for understanding how CBD could actually work.
I'm ready to dive into the nuts and bolts.
Sounds good.
But before we get totally lost in the cells, maybe we should set the stage a bit.
Okay.
What are we really talking about when we say neuroplasticity?
Neuroplasticity is how the brain changes and adapts throughout life, really.
Okay.
It's the foundation for learning, memory, recovering from injury.
So it's like our brains are constantly being molded by our experiences.
Exactly, yeah. It's what lets us learn new skills, form memories, even rewire our brains, like after a stroke.
And you're saying CBD can somehow influence that whole process?
That's right. CBD, or cannabidiol, is a compound from the cannabis plant. And it doesn't have the psychoactive effects of THC, which is its cousin.
Right.
But it has a big impact on the brain,
Okay.
particularly on its ability to change.
That's fascinating. But how does it actually work? I mean, what's going on at the molecular level when CBD comes into play?
So to understand that, we need to start with something really fundamental to cellular communication.
Okay.
Protein-coupled receptors,
Okay.
or GPCRs for short. They're like gatekeepers on cell surfaces,
The gatekeeper.
controlling access for all kinds of molecules, including cannabinoids.
So GPCRs, if I'm picturing this right, they're like doorways on brain cells.
That's a great analogy.
And CBD has to knock on the right door to get inside and do its thing.
Exactly. So imagine a GPCR nestled within the cell membrane,
Yeah.
with parts facing both the outside and the inside of the cell.
Got it.
When a molecule, called a ligand, binds to the outside part of the GPCR, it starts a chain reaction. It's like a domino effect.
So CBD is one of those ligands. What happens when it binds to the GPCR doorway?
It's like a molecular dance. When a ligand, like CBD, binds, the GPCR changes its shape,
Okay.
a bit like a lock clicking open when the right key is inserted. And this shape-shifting activates a G protein on the inside of the cell.
Oh, so the G protein's waiting on the other side of the door, ready to spring into action.
Yes.
What does this G protein actually do then?
It's a messenger, like a relay runner, carrying important information.
Okay.
Once it's activated, it triggers a cascade of molecular events inside the cell,
Okay.
like one domino hitting the next, each step amplifying the signal.
I see. So we have CBD, the ligand, binding to the GPCR, which changes its shape. That activates the G protein messenger, which then sets off this whole cascade. What happens next in this domino effect?
Now, here's where things get really interesting with CBD. You see, it doesn't bind directly to the main cannabinoid receptors in the brain, CB1 and CB2. In the same way that THC does,
All right.
Instead it interacts with a wider range of receptors, like, for example, the serotonin receptor 5-HT1A.
Wait, hold on. Back up a second. If CBD's not going for those main cannabinoid receptors, what's it doing with the serotonin receptor?
Right.
I thought serotonin was all about mood and things like that.
Exactly. And that's a great example of how interconnected our body systems really are. You see, the brain isn't working in isolated compartments.
Right.
It's a web of interactions.
Yeah.
And even though 5-HT1A isn't a cannabinoid receptor, when CBD activates it, it still sets off a cascade that ultimately influences neuroplasticity.
Okay, so the plot thickens. We've got CBD binding to this serotonin receptor, 5-HT1A. It activates that G protein messenger. Then what?
The specific G protein that's linked to 5-HT1A is called G.
G.
And it has a very particular role. It inhibits an enzyme called adenylate cyclase.
Check adenylate cyclase. It's a lot to keep track of.
Okay.
Could you break down what this adenylate cyclase enzyme does?
Sure. Adenylate cyclase produces a molecule called cyclic AMP, or case MP.
Okay.
Think of key MP as a messenger inside the cell, spreading the news that CBD has bound to the receptor. And the levels of this messenger can have a big impact on how adaptable the brain is, how plastic it is.
So CBD binds, activates the G protein, and that inhibits the production of key MP, this important messenger molecule.
Yes.
Feels like we're going deeper and deeper into the inner workings of the cell now. What's the next step in this process?
This is where those MAP kinases you mentioned come in. They're enzymes that act like crucial switches within the cell.
Okay.
And their activity is directly influenced by KMP levels.
So by changing the amount of KMP in the cell, CBD is indirectly flipping these MAP kinase switches.
That's right.
But why are these MAP kinases so important for this whole neuroplasticity thing?
Because they regulate things like gene expression and protein synthesis within neurons,
Okay.
the very building blocks of the brain. And by tweaking those processes, they can either enhance or inhibit the formation of new connections between brain cells.
So CBD, by influencing these MAP kinases, is basically orchestrating a whole molecular symphony. That can lead to new brain cells being born and strengthening the connections between the ones that already exist.
Precisely.
It's like giving your brain the tools to rewire itself.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that this is just one pathway through which CBD influences neuroplasticity.
Oh, wow.
There are other receptors and signaling cascades, each adding a unique piece to this puzzle.
It's incredible to think about all of this happening at such a tiny level,
Yes.
yet having such a huge impact on our brains.
It really highlights how intricate the connections are between different systems in the body.
Yeah.
And it's this complexity that makes studying CBD so fascinating and potentially so important for human health.
This is also fascinating. We've gone from CBD binding to receptors, activating G proteins, influencing enzyme activity, all the way to these MAP kinases that can actually reshape the brain. It's remarkable.
It is. And this journey's just beginning. We've only just started to explore how these signaling cascades are playing out in different parts of the brain.
Okay, I'm hooked. I need to know what happens next in this molecular adventure. Where do these events actually take place in the brain? And how do these specific pathways translate into the benefits we always hear about with neuroplasticity? Tell me more.
Well, let's dive into those brain regions next. So now that we've mapped out the molecular players,
Right.
let's zoom out and see where all the action's happening in your brain.
Okay.
You see, these signaling cascades, they aren't happening everywhere.
Right.
They're concentrated in key regions that are essential for learning, memory, and overall brain health.
Okay, so it's like targeted brain enhancement.
That's a good way to put it.
Which regions are we talking about specifically?
One of the most important ones is the hippocampus.
Okay.
It's a seahorse-shaped structure deep in the brain.
I remember learning about that in school.
And it's absolutely crucial for learning and forming new memories.
And isn't it also one of the first areas hit by Alzheimer's?
You're exactly right. The hippocampus is particularly vulnerable to damage and neurodegenerative diseases,
Right.
which is why CBD's potential to boost neuroplasticity in this region is so exciting.
Okay, so how does CBD actually enhance plasticity in the hippocampus? What's the mechanism behind it?
Well, remember those MAP kinases we talked about?
Yes.
In hippocampus, CBD's influence on those pathways leads to something remarkable: increased neurogenesis.
Neurogenesis?
Yeah.
You mean like the birth of new brain cells?
Exactly.
I thought that only happened when we were kids.
For a long time, that's what scientists thought. But now we know that neurogenesis continues throughout adulthood, especially in the hippocampus. And CBD seems to enhance this process, essentially giving the brain a fresh supply of neurons.
Wow, that's incredible. So CBD is actually contributing to the creation of new brain cells
It is.
in the hippocampus.
Yeah.
But how does that translate into real-world benefits? How does having more neurons actually make our brains work better?
Think of it this way. Neurogenesis in the hippocampus is like adding new recruits to a well-trained army. These new neurons increase the brain's capacity for learning, memory formation, and its ability to adapt to new situations.
So more brain cells equals more brain power.
In a sense, yes. It's like a brain workout.
It's like a brain workout at the molecular level, building a stronger, more resilient brain. But what about other areas besides the hippocampus? Does CBD have an impact elsewhere?
Absolutely. Another key area is the prefrontal cortex,
Okay.
which sits right behind your forehead. This region is like the CEO of the brain,
The CEO.
responsible for higher-level cognitive functions: planning, decision-making, working memory, all that good stuff.
So the prefrontal cortex keeps us organized and on track.
Mhm.
Does CBD stimulate neurogenesis there as well?
While neurogenesis in the prefrontal cortex is more limited compared to the hippocampus,
Okay.
CBD still promotes positive changes there. It does so by enhancing what we call synaptic plasticity.
Synaptic plasticity, what exactly does that mean?
It refers to the ability of synapses, the connections between neurons,
Good
to
one.
strengthen or weaken over time. It's like refining the communication pathways between different parts of the brain, making those connections more efficient.
So CBD is promoting both neurogenesis, the birth of new brain cells, and synaptic plasticity, the strengthening of connections between those
You
cells.
got it.
It's hitting those key brain areas from two different angles.
Precisely. And this two-pronged approach leads to a more adaptable and resilient brain.
Okay.
And remember, this is all happening because CBD is binding to specific receptors
Right.
and setting off those signaling cascades we talked about earlier.
Right, those molecular dominoes falling one after the other. We talked about CBD binding to the 5-HT1A receptor. Are there other receptors involved in triggering these neuroplastic changes?
Yes, there are. CBD is actually quite versatile.
Okay.
Another receptor it binds to is called TRPV1, which stands for Transient Receptor Potential Vanilloid 1.
TRPV1, that's a mouthful. What does this receptor do?
It's involved in sensing pain, heat, and inflammation. It's actually the receptor that's activated by capsaicin,
Okay.
the compound that gives chili peppers their heat.
So CBD, this compound from a plant, is activating the same receptor that gets triggered by something as spicy as a chili pepper. That's wild.
It might seem strange,
Yeah.
but it really highlights the interconnectedness of different bodily systems. And the activation of TRPV1 by CBD is particularly interesting because it can have neuroprotective effects.
Neuroprotective, meaning it protects brain cells from damage.
Exactly. By activating TRPV1,
Right.
CBD can trigger a cascade of events that protect neurons from various threats, including things like oxidative stress and excitotoxicity.
Oxidative stress, excitotoxicity, those sound pretty intense.
They are. Think of oxidative stress like rust accumulating on your brain cells. It's not a good thing. And excitotoxicity is like overstimulating neurons to the point of exhaustion and death.
So CBD is acting like a shield,
That's a good way to put it.
protecting those precious brain cells from these damaging processes.
That's right. And neuroprotection is crucial for maintaining healthy brain function, especially as we age.
This is all really fascinating. We've covered so much, from those signaling cascades and specific receptors to the amazing effects of CBD on neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity, and even its neuroprotective qualities. It's incredible to think that CBD can impact the brain in so many different ways.
It really is. And remember, we've been focusing primarily on CBD's direct interactions with these specific receptors.
Right.
But there's another layer to this story. Another way CBD might be influencing the brain.
Oh, another layer. I'm all ears. What is it?
We've talked about how CBD doesn't directly bind to the main cannabinoid receptors, CB1 and CB2, in the same way that THC does.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it has no influence on the endocannabinoid system at all.
Okay.
In fact, CBD might be interacting with the ECS in some fascinating indirect ways.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these indirect effects.
Let's explore those next.
So before we went off on this other path,
Yeah.
we were talking about how CBD might be influencing the brain indirectly through the endocannabinoid system,
Right.
even without directly binding to those main receptors.
That's right.
It sounds like a whole other dimension to this story.
It's like we've been exploring the mark paths, and now we're venturing off into uncharted territory.
Right.
We see these effects of CBD on neuroplasticity, neuroprotection.
Right.
But the exact ways it's influencing the ECS are still being researched.
It's a puzzle with some missing pieces.
It is.
We talked earlier about how CBD might be boosting the levels of our natural endocannabinoids,
Right.
like anandamide.
Yes.
But how would that work if it's not binding directly to those cannabinoid receptors?
That's the big question. One theory is that CBD might be interfering with the enzymes that break down our natural endocannabinoids.
Okay.
For example, it might inhibit the enzyme FAH, which is responsible for breaking down anandamide.
So if CBD is putting the brakes on FAAH, then anandamide can stick around longer and have a bigger impact.
That's the idea.
It's like indirectly amplifying the effects of our own internal cannabis system.
Exactly. And these higher levels of anandamide could lead to a cascade of beneficial effects, including enhanced neuroplasticity and neuroprotection.
Fascinating. So CBD is sort of working behind the scenes, subtly shifting the balance of our endocannabinoid system. Are there other ways it might be influencing the ECS indirectly?
There's another interesting hypothesis. CBD might be interacting with other receptors within the endocannabinoid system, ones we haven't discovered yet.
New receptors. Wow, that would be a huge discovery. What kind of receptors could they be?
There are some candidates, like GPR55 and GPR119.
Okay.
These receptors are thought to be involved in regulating lots of processes, from pain and inflammation to even metabolism.
So the endocannabinoid system might be a lot more complex than we initially thought. It's not just about CB1 and CB2 anymore.
Exactly. The more we learn about the ECS, the more we realize just how vast and intricate it is. And CBD seems to be interacting with it in ways we're only beginning to understand.
This is really exciting.
Mhm.
But even with those missing puzzle pieces, what we know about CBD and how it affects neuroplasticity is pretty amazing. What does all this mean for people, in everyday life? How can CBD actually improve our lives?
That's the key question. The potential of CBD-induced neuroplasticity is vast. It has implications for everything, from boosting brain function in healthy people to maybe even slowing down neurodegenerative diseases.
Let's start with a healthy brain.
Mm.
How could CBD benefit someone who doesn't have a neurological disorder?
Imagine you're learning a new language, picking up a new skill, or just wanting to stay sharp as you get older. All those things rely on neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and change.
So CBD could potentially make us better learners, more adaptable, more resilient to aging.
That's the hope. By enhancing neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity, CBD could improve learning, memory, and cognitive flexibility. It's like giving your brain a tune-up.
I like the sound of that. What about those more serious conditions we mentioned, like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's? Could CBD help with those?
That's where things get really exciting. Neurodegenerative diseases are characterized by the loss of neurons and a decline in brain function. CBD's ability to promote both neuroplasticity and neuroprotection could be a way to slow down or even stop this decline.
So it's not just about managing symptoms, it's about actually changing the course of the disease.
Exactly. And we're still in the early stages of research, but preclinical studies are looking promising. For instance, in animal models of Alzheimer's disease, CBD has been shown to reduce the formation of amyloid plaques, which are those harmful things that contribute to cognitive decline.
So it's targeting one of the hallmarks of the disease.
That's right. And it also seems to reduce inflammation in the brain, which is another factor in neurodegenerative diseases.
Sounds like CBD is hitting these diseases from multiple angles, which is really encouraging.
It is, and that's what makes CBD such a promising candidate for treatment. It's not a cure-all, but its many actions on the brain, especially its ability to enhance neuroplasticity, open up so many possibilities.
I can see why you're so enthusiastic about this whole field. It feels like we're on the brink of a major breakthrough in understanding how to harness the power of the endocannabinoid system for human health.
It really is a transformative time in medicine. The more we learn about the endocannabinoid system, the more we realize its potential to impact not just neuroplasticity, but all sorts of physiological processes.
You mentioned personalized medicine earlier. Could we see a future where CBD therapies are tailored to an individual's needs based on their endocannabinoid system?
I think that's where we're headed. Imagine being able to analyze someone's endocannabinoid tone, their genes, other biomarkers, to figure out the best CBD dose and form for their specific condition.
It's like creating a customized brain-boosting cocktail. That's an incredible idea.
And with the advancements in genetic testing and our understanding of the ECS, this vision of personalized CBD medicine is becoming more and more realistic.
It's a really exciting time to be following this research. What are some key takeaways you want our listener to leave with today?
Well, first, the endocannabinoid system is a vital system that helps maintain balance in the body, including the brain.
Okay.
Second, CBD, even though it doesn't bind directly to the main cannabinoid receptors, can have a profound impact on neuroplasticity through many different pathways,
Right.
both direct and indirect. And finally, CBD has huge therapeutic potential for a wide range of conditions, and we're only just scratching the surface of what it can do.
It's been an incredible journey exploring this world of CBD and neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
We've gone from the very basics of GPCRs and the ECS to those complex signaling cascades and the idea of personalized CBD medicine.
And as we've seen, the journey's far from over. There's still so much more to discover and understand about this amazing system.
That's the beauty of the deep dive, right? Always learning,
Absolutely.
always exploring. To our listener, keep asking those questions, keep diving deep into the things you're curious about, and stay tuned for more about CBD and the endocannabinoid system, because there are sure to be more groundbreaking discoveries to come.
Definitely. There's a whole world of possibilities waiting to be uncovered.
And that's a wrap for our deep dive into CBD and neuroplasticity. Thanks for joining us on this incredible exploration. Until next time, stay curious.